The average cost of a house in the U.S. is around $410,700, according to data provided by the National Association of Realtors. And the mortgage interest rates at the time of this episode recording is sitting at 7.07%. That means that your monthly mortgage cost will be around $2,900. And given this amount, a lot of people are wondering, will it make more sense if I just purchase a vacant lot and build my home from zero instead? Well, I decided to run a couple of scenarios to show you the numbers and help you make an informed decision. So today we're going to look at numbers from New York and Florida. We're going to compare these two cities because I believe these two examples would provide you an idea of what it's like to purchase a home in a city with a high cost of living. And Florida will be a scenario that will be closer to the national average. So to start with this exercise, let's look at the purchase price of a move-in ready home. And so the average, according to my research, is somewhat around $600,000. You could find homes that are a lot more expensive than that, and some homes that are definitely a lot more affordable than that. New York, it's a big place with lots and lots of buildings and apartments and co-ops and mansions. So when you're taking all of those numbers into account, we're landing at an average of $600,000. Okay. Now, moving on to the next category, which is construction. Let's say that this is not applicable because we're talking about a home that is moving ready. Okay. So if it's ready, there's nothing for you to build. Now, let's talk about closing costs and permits. So given that this is a moving ready home, we don't have to deal with any permits, but we do have to deal with closing costs. And they usually go somewhere between 2 to 5% of the purchase price. So taking into account this whole $600,000 amount, we're talking about an average of $12,000 to $30,000 in closing costs, depending on the type of property that you're buying. Then we move on to inspection and design. Once again, there's nothing to design here because we're assuming in this exercise that you're talking about a moving ready home. However, you do have the option to pay for an inspection service, which is highly recommended because not everything is as it seems to the naked eye, especially if you don't have experience. So it is highly recommended that you rely on someone who is an expert to come in and use their experience to pinpoint things that are not up to code or things that will require some fixing. And you can potentially use that inspection report for negotiations, call it either to request the seller to fix those issues or just to simply to negotiate the price down. And the investment for an inspector can go easily somewhere between $300 to $500. Then moving on to the next category, if we're going to talk about land preparation and utilities, in reality, there's nothing for you to do there because you're not building from scratch. So that's not applicable. And when you take all of these numbers into account, we're talking that a moving ready home could range somewhere between $612,300 to $630,500, right? This is for New York City prices. Now let's transition into building from zero. You pick a lot that you find in an area that you like, and how much does that lot cost you? Well, depending on where you are and the demand, a land lot could easily go from $200,000 to $1 million. So that's just to give you a sense that we're talking about a big range right here. Then we move into construction costs. And when we talk about construction, we're not necessarily talking just about the building materials, but everything that goes into it, you know, the labor, people, their expertise, hiring, contractors, electricians, so all of that goes into the equation. And that cost can easily go somewhere between $400,000 to $800,000, okay? And that range is based on a 2,000 square foot home, okay? Now, moving along, and let's talk about closing costs and permits. So in this case, since you're building from zero, you do need to take those permit costs into account. And they can easily range somewhere between $20,000 to $100,000. Now, let's move into the inspection and design portion of it. You will definitely need someone to help you design the home, an architect, and probably even a civil engineer, depending on the type of project or home that you want to build. So when we factor in that type of labor, we're talking about somewhere between $10,000 to $50,000. Then moving along to land preparation and utilities, you definitely need to prepare the land before setting the foundation, and the utilities are definitely a must because you would at least need electricity to build that house from scratch. So we're talking easily somewhere between $10,000 to $50,000. So when you take all of this into consideration, we're talking that to build a home from scratch in New York City, it will cost you somewhere between $640,000 to $2 million. Okay? That is a big number. That is a huge difference between building from zero to getting a home that is move-in ready. The range, even at the low end for building a home from zero, it starts at $640,000, which is definitely a lot more expensive than a move-in ready home. And this is just on the cost basic. Let's also factor into account the timing, right? So let's say, for example, you decide to go for a move-in ready home. We're talking about you being able to move into that home somewhere between 30 to 45 days. From the moment you put in the offer to the underwriting, to the closing, getting the fundings from the bank and everything, you could potentially move into that home somewhere between 30 to 45 days. But if you decide to find the land and build your home from zero, we're talking potentially somewhere between 12 to 18 months. That's a long time to wait for you to move into some place. And that's not even taking into account your time, because you need experience to manage your contractor. You need experience to find someone who's going to do you well and do what they promise to do in your home building project, unless you're a contractor on your own and you have all the experience, out of which the scenario that I just run probably doesn't apply to you, because I'm sure you can get bulk pricing and save a lot of money on construction costs. But for the people who are not into construction, that's something that you need to factor in, because if you have multiple jobs, or let's say even if you have just one job and that job requires a lot of your time, you can stretch that window even more. Instead of waiting 12 to 18 months, you can potentially wait up to 2 years, if not more, to be able to finally move into your property. So that's something that you need to take into consideration. Welcome to Novarize, your channel for financial education. We talk anything related about real estate investment, precious metals, the stock market, and business. Now, let's transition to Florida and look at the numbers. So when it comes to Florida, the average cost of a home goes for approximately $411,000. This number is actually closer to the national average that we saw at the beginning of this video. In terms of construction, once again, not applicable, because if it's a move-in ready home, there's nothing for you to build, right? In terms of closing costs, those you do need to factor in. And they can easily range somewhere between $8,220 to $20,550, right? In terms of inspection and design, there's nothing for you to worry design-wise, because the home has been designed for you. But you do, once again, need to consider inspection costs. And I highly suggest you do get an inspection before you buy that home, right? So that cost could range somewhere between $300 to $500. In terms of land preparation and utilities, that's not applicable because you're not building from zero here. And so when you take these numbers into account, if you were to purchase a move-in ready home in the state of Florida, we're talking about a range of $419,520 to $432,050. Okay? Now, let's see how the numbers look like if you choose to buy a lot and build your home from zero. So the lands in Florida are definitely a lot more affordable compared to New York City. And they could range somewhere between $900,000-ish, right? Around that number. Then in terms of construction, now that we're building something, you need to look into that cost. And it is a little bit cheaper because labor in Florida is cheaper compared to New York. And so that could easily range somewhere between $300,000 to $560,000. And some of the construction materials could also be cheaper because you're closer to the source, right? Then in terms of closing costs and permit, expect to spend at least $5,000, meaning $5,000 and above, depending on the county that you are planning to build your future home. And in terms of inspection and design, it all depends on the type of project that you're working on. So you can expect to spend somewhere between 10 to 17% of that construction cost And in terms of land preparation and utilities, you can expect to spend somewhere between $1,500 to $3,000. And so when you add all of those numbers, we're talking about a ballpark that goes somewhere between $341,400 to $602,900. So building a home from zero in Florida could definitely put you on the more affordable side, depending on the type of project that you do and the type of construction materials that you select. As you can see, the lower end of the ballpark starts at $341,400. So if you're careful with your budgeting and if you do have the experience to select the right team and they do you well, you can actually keep that cost on the lower end of the equation. So building a home in Florida versus buying one that is move-in ready can actually be more comparable and give you more choices to choose from as opposed to New York City. Now, the question is, which one is better? Once again, that will be entirely up to you. I personally love New York City and I don't picture myself living anywhere else, but that doesn't take away the fact that I could invest my money in Florida. And that's exactly what I do. I live in New York City and I have my rental portfolio down in Florida. Now, in terms of buying your moving ready home versus building one from scratch, that will be up to your discretion. It depends on what you like. Do you want to buy a home that is moving ready and not deal with any of the headaches and just, get your loan and move in ASAP? Or you don't actually mind investing those 12, 18 months, possibly even 2 years in building that project so that you could potentially and eventually move into the house? It's a matter of taste, really. And my goal with this video was to give you 2 different scenarios so you can make an informed decision and figure out what works best for you. And while I still have you here, I want to invite you to check out this video that talks about investing in brand new homes in the state of Florida. And I think that information will definitely complement your learning. I'll see you in the next video. Take care. Bye-bye.